The year is 2012. President Obama has just won re-election against Governor Mitt Romney. Obama is popular in about the same way that McDonald's is broadly popular, but he doesn't really command a lot of depth of support, and he has his detractors. This is the first presidential election in which the winner of the Oval Office will have not have polled particularly well among self-identified white voters. As we transition from the red state, blue state divide simplicity of 2000 and 2004 into what was seen as a broader consensus after the 2008 election, only to have that consensus unravel with the Tea Party and headed into this election in 2012, Americans who treat politics like it's a team sport are hungrier than ever for more data. On the weekend talk shows, the pundits are starting to sound a lot more like pollsters than they are like policy analysts. They're talking the language of demographics and what that means for the future, as opposed to talking about, policies that could actually help out the American people. The white backlash that grew with the Tea Party is what eventually metastasized into the unending identity politics that dominate the conversation of today. It's in that environment that BuzzFeed released a series of maps that showed how every state would have voted had only a certain demographic been allowed to vote. One of those maps is shown here. It's if only white people had been allowed to vote. Within about 6 months' time, this map was being shared across all social media platforms under the header, if taxpayers only had been allowed to vote. Now, the Tea Party was not a racial movement. I heard that a lot back in those days when I was working as a Republican staffer, and I do think that some of the people who said that were being sincere. But for most of the rest of them, when their trusted news sources let them in on these little secrets about how the black president was planning to bring about communism by means of private health insurance, or how he was planning to tax middle-class white Americans more so that way he could fund projects for black folks and immigrants and other urban minorities, and how this is all part of some secret cabal of internationalist, Muslim, college-educated, queer, feminist, stateless Jews who were plotting the downfall of American values, a lot of them didn't really examine these claims very critically. And if anything, the right has gotten more mask off with these claims in recent years, so I'm really not surprised to see this map make a comeback. But I hope I don't have to go too far into explaining why the sentiment of this map is bullshit. It's a dog whistle, plain and simple. But what about the facts of the matter? What can we say about that? Now, conservatives have long attacked the principle of having progressive income tax rates, as well as just the concept of federal income tax or the concept of federal corporation tax. But it became central to their messaging during the New Deal era when FDR raised the top marginal rate up to 91%. Now, it could go into all of the different misconceptions that people have about the marginal rate versus the effective rate, and the historical data that we have that says that higher marginal rates actually lead to better outcomes, both in individual income tax and also corporation tax. But that's kind of its own video, so I'm not going to go into that right now. I could also go into a conversation about tax loopholes and the inequities of our tax deduction system and how that favors the rich, or our low capital gains rate and how that favors the super rich, or how the mass movement towards privatization and more government contracts being in private hands means that oftentimes the money that the super rich pay into the income tax system just ends up coming back to them in the form of stock dividends. But again, all of that is for another video, and I want to fight this on its own terms. I want to fight this on the idea that's being laid out here and not rely on things like that. There's a reason why the folks out there who put out things about income tax rates are so focused on the income tax. And that's because if they pretend, in quotation marks, that any other form of taxation exists, then their argument falls apart. Hey friends, in what has already been a slightly troubled production for this video, I just realized that I had deleted a segment here, so I'm going to put it back in. It's regarding payroll taxes. Payroll taxes, as is a big issue that's coming up lately, cover Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of that stuff, the entitlement programs. And the reason they're called entitlements is because you pay money directly into it. And so the idea is that you're entitled to get money back out of it. Conservatives hate that term for many reasons, but it's a direct pay in, direct payout system. That's why it's an entitlement, regardless of what they pretend to say about the meaning of the word entitlement. But as a lot of folks are aware, those taxes cut off after you hit $185,000. And that was something that was originally built into the system, although obviously the cutoff amount was a lot lower, in terms of inflation back when the payroll tax was instituted way back when. But what that in effect means is that, 185,000, you can debate whether that's truly upper middle class or not. That's a topic for another video. But everybody who is essentially considered statistically upper middle class and beyond is paying less money in payroll taxes than somebody who is closer to median income. Median personal income in this country hovers in the high $40,000 range. So someone who's making the high $40,000 range is in effect paying a much larger and more substantial portion of their income in payroll taxes than someone who's making, say, $5 million in earned income. So wanted to cover that. Thank you very much.
The real game changer comes when we're talking about state and local taxes. The Institute of Taxation and Economic Policy, which is also called ITEP, maintains a running ledger on the average tax burdens of the residents of every single state. They break it down by income group, and they try to account for everything that's out there. Some states do have progressive income tax structures, and that certainly helps, but a lot of them don't. And so they rely on a combination of flat income tax, sales tax, service and use fees, service taxes, fines, and property taxes in order to make up revenues. Now, you might be thinking, well, if everyone's paying, then why does that matter? Who cares? It's all roughly got to balance out, right? Not remotely. Most states' tax structures are aggressively regressive. Now, this kind of crosses the red state, blue state divide, and I'll get back to that in a little bit. So don't think that it's necessarily a product of that. But I want you to picture something here for a moment. Say that you have a family who earns $60,000 a year, which would be it'd be pretty close to average in a lot of states, national average a little below. Now, say that there's another family out there that earns 20 times what they earn. Does that family's house necessarily have to be 20 times as valuable as the other families? And as a matter of fact, property taxes in wealthier zip codes oftentimes tend to be at lower rates than property taxes in zip codes that are not as wealthy. Is that family eating 20 times the amount of food? Are the clothes that they are buying 20 times as expensive? Do they own 20 times the number of cell phones? Do they drive 20 times the number of cars? Do they use 20 times the amount of gas? You're starting to get my point. The answer to all of these questions is no. I live in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania has one of the most regressive tax structures of any state in the country. And however regressive you are thinking it is in your head right now, I guarantee you it is worse than that. Someone at the bottom 20% of the income earners is paying more than double the taxes and the state and local tax than someone who is in the top percentage of income earners. That is how lopsided it is.
So I want you to keep this in mind because oftentimes these people who are singled out as not paying taxes by these politicians or social media posts, they're paying it at the state and local level. And as I said before, also with payroll taxes. If you try to point this out, then the poster will immediately get defensive and say, oh, I'm only talking about the income tax. But yes, there's a reason why they only want to talk about that. And that is because every single time they have convinced people over the years to lower the federal tax rates, oftentimes at a small gain to them, if any, these state and local tax rates have to go up in order to continue to fund basic services. And that puts more of the tax burden on the poorer and less of it on the richer parts of society and makes our tax structure even more regressive. Now, the people who knew this back in the day, this is the whole reason why they created the federal income tax system to begin with. The whole point of it was that it was supposed to have a higher impact on wealthier people. That's why originally poorer folks didn't even pay the federal income tax. It was only supposed to be for the wealthy. And that's the whole point of the tax structure, because when we have these low national taxes, we have very high state and local taxes because of the mechanisms that are being used for taxation. So just remember that next time you see one of these things and try to confront it, because that really is the important argument here. But that's all I have for today, folks. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything else that you wanted to bring up, please let me know. I'm open to that. If you have any comments, if you liked the video, if you didn't like the video, I appreciate all of them. So thank you very much and have a good day and take care, everybody.